Welcome to the Age of Reason, and welcome to its new home, Secular TV. Now, I do want to say that thank you to Atheist Analysis for all the help they've given me in the relaunch of the Age of Reason, and the help they provided when I was on their network/channel. They were greatly appreciated for all the help that they did offer when it came down to it. And I would like to say that this was a clean break, and that we have... Welcome to the Age of Reason, and welcome to its new home, Secular TV. Now, I do want to say that thank you to Atheist Analysis for all... And that's my voice double-sided because it was opened in another window. Okay, gotta love the tech issues. They basically have been beautiful tonight. So, I love my voice. Hearing it was a beautiful thing to move on from. So now that we've gotten the I love Atheist Analysis for letting us separate from them speech out of the way, let's actually break into introductions and get to know our panelists tonight on the importance of activism. So first off, we have Brian Fields with us. Brian Fields, it's always a pleasure to actually get to talk to you tonight. So how are you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm doing quite well. Thank you for inviting me.
It's always a pleasure to have you on, my friend, and I always love talking to an activist from a neighboring state. So what makes you qualified to talk about the importance of activism tonight, Dave? Brian?
I have no idea. No, I do a lot of work here in central Pennsylvania, and we've got a lot going on right now, and I'm hoping to be able to contribute to the conversation.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here tonight, and thank you for being on. So, David, it's a pleasure to have you here tonight. It's always an honor to have someone from Dogma Debate on the Age of Reason, because they are a harbinger of reason itself. So, what qualifies you to be here to talk about the importance of activism tonight, David?
What qualifies me? I have no idea. Thank you for having me, though. You know, we started Dogma Debate about going on 3 years now, and all of the work we're doing throughout the secular movement, from atheist audiobooks to producing multiple podcasts, including the live broadcast, the radio show that is Dogma Debate, and I guess all of the talks we travel around and give all over the country, and the live shows that we do. So, hey, we're just out here trying to make the world a better place.
Well, thank you for being here tonight, David, and it's an honor to have you on. But our last guest, surely not the least, because we will be having Danielle Moscato join us in our second half an hour of the show. So, Damien, AtHope, welcome to the Age of Reason. Your first time on here, if I remember correctly, correct?
That is correct. I'm Damien AtHope, and I'm an axiological atheist, and that's one of the major motivations for my activism. I have two realms of activism, which basically that I want to promote rational thinking, and the other one is humanism. And I do both those things. I have web pages on Facebook. I also have a meetup group, and I do street activism, as well as I also do humanistic things like feeding the homeless, and I've also gone in an after-school program for inner-city youth. And I always do it as an out atheist. Even the after-school program was completely Christian, and I actually thought that they wouldn't allow me to work there, but I worked there for 3 months. But I told them up front, you know, I wanted to let you know that I am an atheist, and they said as long as I don't, you know, push my values on the children, then they were fine. So I just want to give a good message.
So, instead of asking you your credentials, because we're going to get into those later on in the show, what is an... I'm probably going to butcher this. What is a axiological atheist?
Okay, axiology is a value theory. It started out as a philosophy, but now there's a formal axiology, which is a formal science. It's a social science of how you assess value. And this has to do with really everything. Everything from understanding how to judge what is true to actually a scientific thing to understand how to use ethics or apply. It's really across the board, all kinds of stuff. It's used in research. A lot of people are using axiology actually without realizing they are. It basically, anytime you value judge things or you understand that things have value. Like if you said, I'm a humanist and I believe in good, the fact that you say something is good is an axiological statement. So you're actually using it probably all the time. So, and that's also how you would judge one thing from another. An axiological atheist is an atheist philosophy that basically puts axiology towards the belief question. In other words, is God good? That would be an axiological question. An axiological atheist answer would be no. Gods have no value. Both if they don't exist or if they do exist, they don't have value.
Well, thank you for that, Damien. It's a pleasure to actually understand what that terminology actually is now. Now, let me actually introduce my co-host, as they are the epic reasons behind why this show is amazing at its core. So let's start with Albany. Welcome back to the show as a veteran co-host, since this is your third show.
Hi, Mike. I am very happy to still be here, to still be accepted by you and Randy, and I am loving being a part of the Age of Reason, secular TV now, and this just keeps getting better and better. So I'm excited for the show tonight and really hear everyone's viewpoints on activism.
Can't you just hear the enthusiasm in her voice? So, Foxhole, Randy, my boy, my wingman since the beginning, how are you doing tonight?
How's it going, Mike?
Okay, since we've gotten his introduction out of the way, let's break into the topic at hand. Who wants to start us off on activism, since you guys are the subject matter experts, as we would say? Not everybody at once. Let's actually start with someone that did an amazing thing this weekend, something that was 24-hour based and that was amazing at the core, that was all-inspiring, something that made me tear up when I heard the final achievements of what went on with the 24-hour dogma debate experience that went on this weekend. So, David, do you want to give us a little bit more information behind what went on and how acts like this and just doing things like this are important for activism at the core of it?
Absolutely. And thank you for those kind words, first of all. So we basically, I would encourage everyone to go to dogmadebate.com, and right on the main page there's a link that says 24-hour broadcast-a-thon press release. Just click that. It'll take you right to all the info and everything that actually took place. It was really mind-blowing, and we shocked ourselves. Leading up to it, we were going to do a $5,000 goal. And 2 days before the event, they asked us to double it. Double the goal. You guys can do 10,000, and we didn't think we could, but we said we would, and moved on. And through a crazy turn of events, and the major players that sort of tucked in and made everything happen, they're given credit in the press release, which is why I would like you to read it. Todd Stiefel came in and offered what he called a sextuplet match during his hour. We had all kinds of matches going on back and forth, and we ended up raising over $31,000. And we stayed on the air for 24 hours nonstop, and that was. It actually wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be, just because I absolutely love doing radio. And this is kind of a vacation for me when I get to sit down and do the show. All the hard work happens when people aren't listening. All the hard work with all the volunteers and contractors and employees of Dogma Debate and now Secular Media Group. It's just incredible how much goes into it and all the people that were making it happen. Not a single person got paid a single dime the entire 24-hour period. Everybody that helped with that were all volunteers. They not only showed up and did their jobs, they showed up with extra stuff. They brought food. One actually brought toilet paper. And when he walked in, I just looked at him and smiled, and he's like, "You didn't think of this, did you?" Had a whole bunch of toilet paper. We had a bunch of people here. I was like, "You're right. I would not have thought to buy toilet paper for a broadcast." And so everybody thought about all these little things, and it was just amazing. And I say my comment on the press release is, I've never, in 3 years doing this show, teared up at the mic. Like, I've never actually become emotional. I've talked about a wide range of things. I've gotten upset. I've gotten sad. I've never actually had tears in my eyes, and I can no longer say that. When people were writing in their dedications, this is to actually answer your question, addressing the theme of today's show. When people were writing in their dedications, every time they make a donation, they got to do a dedication. And so many of the dedications had to do with how Foundation Beyond Belief has changed my life, or how listening to Dogma Debate has changed my life, or how, listening to David Smalley has helped me cope with X, Y, or Z. And hearing how the secular movement is reaching out and touching people who thought they were the only one, who live out in the middle of nowhere and think they're the only atheist in the entire state that they live in, and then they connect and they reach out, and then we become a hub of so many things, of audiobooks, of other podcasts, connecting, hooking up with Seth Andrews and Hemant Mehta and sharing blogs and us linking to each other's stuff. We don't treat it like a competition. We don't treat it like a capitalist marketplace. We treat it like a movement first and then a business second. And the people who get that twisted and treat it like a business first, they get eaten alive by the movement itself. This thing is built on relationships, it's built on partnerships, it's built on grassroots fundraising, and we started a thing called the Fourth Listener $4 Challenge, and a huge percentage of donations comes in, and in $4 chunks. There were over 300 donors that got us to our goal. It wasn't one guy that came in and dropped, 30 grand or 25 grand. It was grassroots, okay? Of course there were some big donors, but once it was all said and done and everybody got involved, we ended up raising $31,454, and then a group outside of our show matched 20,000 of that. And so it ended up being a total of 51,000 for Foundation Beyond Belief. And these people, if you don't know what they do, please go to foundationbeyondbelief.org. They do absolutely amazing things. And I'll just say that you start doing what you want to do, whatever it is. If it's a podcast, radio show, some sort of video program like this one, a blog, just out on the street corners talking to people, street epistemology, whatever it is that you feel. I mean, look, if you're an ass, share your gift with people. Whatever it is, do what you do best to make a difference. And slowly but surely, if you're doing it for the right reasons, you will see people affected in amazing ways. And that's all we're talking about. That's all this whole thing is about. And hearing that we're inspiring other people to get involved, inspiring other people to donate, it's not just entertainment anymore. Seeing that number, that $31,454 when we closed out that 24th hour, it brought it home. And I think that's another reason why we got so emotional, is it brought it home. It made it real. It made it tangible. This went from an idea, from fun and talking. It generated actual cash to make actual progress and help people all over the world. And no matter what it is you're doing, whether you're contributing with money, contributing with your time, donating, whatever it is, sharing a link to somebody's show, creating a pseudonym if you can't come out, creating a pseudonym on Facebook, and sharing news stories about people in activism that are being mistreated, whatever it is, you're sharing information, you're a part of secularity, you're a part of skepticism. Playing that role is vital in whatever way you can step up. So don't ever think, well, I would just offer a little bit. Well, I would start a little blog, but nobody's going to listen to it. For the first 3 months, I had 12 hits on my website. 12. And look at it now. Dogwood has 2.5 million downloads, and we just raised 51 grand for Foundation Beyond Belief. You've got to start somewhere, so get started.
And one thing that Dogma Debate actually does immaculately is that they actually just don't focus on the geographical location where they're actually based. They actually focus on issues that are going on all over the country, which is something that is amazing that David does, and he is a master at.
I don't know that I've mastered anything. I appreciate the kind words. It's hard not to, because I'm in Texas, and so there's a lot of stupid going on here.
Those of us that have actually been in Texas, I can vouch for that. Oh my God. Had to spend 3 years at Fort Hood.
Oops.
Worst 3 years of my life. Don't get me wrong, I love my time in service. It's just there were a few intellectual differences that came up there that I haven't come across anywhere else in the world. It's like its own little time. It's like its own little pocket in time that's basically exists 50 years behind everywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
At least from a intellectual standpoint.
Well, and people have asked me, people have said, why don't you get the hell out of there? Why don't you go to San Francisco or move somewhere to the East Coast where it's more liberal? And I'm like, Texas needs me. I'm not going anywhere. I want to be right here in Texas. I want to affect people. My license plate on my truck is the word atheist. Well, you know what? That's not to rub it in the face of Christians. That's to connect with that one guy who thinks he's the only atheist in Dallas, Texas, and looks up and sees that license plate and goes, oh my gosh, that is awesome.
That actually takes guts in itself, though. But let me actually pass it on to the rest of the panel because I feel like I'm turning into a fanboy with David being here. So let me go over to another friend. Brian, it is always an honor to have someone that is as experienced as an activist as yourself on the show. What perspective as an activist do you have to direct the conversation in the direction of?
Well, I as well appreciate the kind words. I do what I can, but here in central Pennsylvania, we've got a lot going on. It's not too dissimilar from places like Texas, where it's, they talk about Pennsylvania being, Philadelphia on one end, Pittsburgh on the other, and Alabama in between. And in the areas where I live, we've got Amish running around in horse and buggies, and all that other stuff, and Mennonites and others that really take a dim view of atheists. And I really want to echo and appreciate what David said about trying to reach out to people and make sure that they know that they're not alone. And with the organization that I run, Pennsylvania Non-Believers, that's precisely what we're doing. Is we're trying to get people in central Pennsylvania that are non-theist to atheists, agnostics, humanists, whatever, to know that they may feel alone, but they are certainly not alone, and they have an opportunity to get together, and for that, I think makes a big difference for a lot of people just in and of itself. And it always excites me when I put something together and people come out, and we're going to be doing our 4th conference this next September, and I've had so many people with the previous conferences we've done come up to me. It's their first event because it's a local conference. They don't necessarily jump to a national conference or drive all over the place or can't afford to travel, so they have access to all of these people that they see doing things in the movement, but they don't have any connection to. They can't just call up these people and talk to them or whatever, so they can come to the conference and get to know other people in the movement and be inspired by that, and then turn around and create action from that. And when I see that happen, we've got one of our board members who first ran into us at our first conference, and now he's deeply involved in the organization, and he's working hard, and so you see this, and you can't help but be inspired by it. And so for me, activism is not just doing the work, but finding ways to inspire other people to join you in doing the work. And that always thrills me when I see it.
Well, thank you for that colorful answer to my question. Randy, you got a question?
I did. I wanted to bring Damien in on this one and ask him about some of the response he received when he had his booth set up in California there.
Yeah, I'm Damien. When I had the booth, you mean when I had it at the Pride in Santa Ana?
Yes, that's what it was.
I thought it was amazing. I mean, one of the things I want to do is in-reach and outreach. I try to in-reach, inform, non-believers, because we don't come to, non-belief, with being taught. I mean, we're taught how to be a Christian. We're taught how to be a Muslim. We're taught how to be, whatever the religion or God is. We don't really have, schools or, parents or, people we know really teach us how to be, unbelievers. So it's kind of like something we have to almost do on our own, and I really think it's important. So that's part of the in-reach, and outreach at the same time. I wanted to go out to LGBT community, and I wanted to show that atheists, care. At least me as an atheist, I care. And I see people as valuable. And it was funny because I was actually the only atheist to show up. Me and my booth, and there was like 7 Christian groups, and they asked me, well, the Christians say that they love us anyways, and what do you think as an atheist? And what does an atheist think about someone who's homosexual? And I said, well, personally for me, that's a weird question. It's like if you ask me, what do I think about someone who's heterosexual? Are you asking me, can people have sex? I mean, I don't understand the question. To me, there is no difference between someone being homosexual or heterosexual. It's a relationship style. It's a sexual preference. It's a love style. I mean, so I said I don't have to accept you. I mean, you're already normal. There is nothing I have to accept. I mean, I accept science, and reason, and so because of that, I mean, I fully, welcome any gender style, any sexual style. I mean, as long as people are doing non-coercive sexual acts towards others, then I support it, as long as it's with adults. And so, I mean, but it was so funny. They felt so happy. Oh, I love that answer. That's so wonderful. And I said, you have value. I said, you don't need gods to give it to you. You already have it. And you have rights, and I don't give it to you, and no one gives it to you. This thinking that somehow that we can approve of someone's lifestyle is the thinking that we have rights over them. I don't give you your approval. You already have it.
Yeah. Yeah,
I love
that's a good
tabling
point.
at LGBT events. I always enjoy doing that.
And the other thing too,
I'm
they
always
asked,
interested to see people's responses and hear the responses people have to that. A lot.
well, they were surprised that I was so helpful, even though I'm straight. But I told them I am genderqueer. And I'm also mildly intersex. So I was born genetically a little bit different, and it changes how I view the world. I mean, some of the ways and how I see and do things. And I also try to be out about that, because there's no shame in what we're born as, and I think there's a lot of shame that goes along that people put on people that are LGBT, and that's why I wanted to go out there and make a thing that you are okay, and I think it's funny because some people say atheists, don't have a belief system, and I think they do have a belief system. They believe in science and reality, and they usually, form their beliefs off of reason and evidence. So, and if you do that, go ahead.
I wouldn't call it a belief system. I think understanding science, accepting science are perfectly fine, but I don't think science requires a belief. I think science just requires evidence. So I'm one of those people that say, it doesn't have a belief system. It's the lack of a belief. By definition, that's what the word means. But I find it so interesting anytime Christians say that they are told to love gays anyway, because that statement is not only contradictory to the Bible, and not only contradictory to the New Testament in Romans 1:24 through 32, but it also even damns them to being worthy of death. If you read actually Romans 1:24 through 32, it lists gays, it lists lesbians, and then it lists a whole bunch of other people that are horrible, including people who debate, by the way. So, guilty. And then it gets all the way down to the end, and then it says, not only are they worthy of death, but anyone who supports them is worthy of death. So by Christians speaking up saying, but I support gay rights and I'm told to love them anyway, they're damning themselves too. I wish they would wear little Bible verses around their neck instead of crosses so we could show them what they believe.
How condescending is that, though, to say, I to love them anyway? I mean, to say,
I don't think it's loving at all.
Yeah, it's like, well, no, I mean, the core of that statement is to identify and say, there's something wrong with you,
right?
But
I'm
going to love you anyway. It's insane. It's like it's an acknowledgement of what they're taught about the core values of the Bible, and then twisting it around and trying to reconcile that for what they believe Jesus was supposed to have them say or do or believe or think. And it just fascinates me how in the end how condescending it is. It's just
it always gets me when they say things like, well, I love them anyway, like you said, and then when you say, but they didn't do anything wrong, they will then compare homosexuality to murderers and anyone who has stolen and anyone who has lied, and they start listing off a bunch of things that affect someone else in a negative way.
Correct.
And then throw homosexuality in there like someone else is being accidentally homosexualed. It's ridiculous. Incredible.
Well, with that,
let's hear from Albany.
Let me jump in here and hand the ball over to Danielle Moscato, the PR director of American Atheist. Welcome, Danielle. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I just joined the show. I had previous engagement, so I don't know what you guys are talking about, but I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on. What can I tell you? Where are we?
You sound like you're running through a voice scrambler. It sounded like we were talking to... I don't want to make a joke, but it sounds like Jabba the Hutt.
Oh dear. Can you hear me though? I'm on.
There's an echo on.
Let me see if I can fix that.
That's okay. We're just hearing everything twice. That's how important it is.
Everything's.
Man, look, technical
tech issues galore tonight. So
hey, look, I was amazed that we got through 24 hours, right? I was amazed that the thing didn't drop out every 10 minutes. We got through 24 hours of broadcast. I was literally in the last hour of the show. Hemet made us on hold, and the show decides to just like, wow. So we had to restart the broadcast. So trust me, man, I've been there.
Can you hear me now? Is this okay?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly, Danielle. So how are you doing tonight, Danielle?
I'm doing just fine. We're promoting our billboard campaign and the 2015 National Convention that campaign is promoting. We did, I think, 4 TV interviews about it today, and this is my 3rd podcast about it, so it's going pretty well. Yeah.
Awesome.
No rest for the wicked. What can you say?
Well, I don't know if I'm that wicked. I'm just, it's civil rights activism. Yeah, if they want to call us that,
So how does that relate to the importance of activism, and how important would you say that the Billboard campaign is as a civil rights activist in which you are?
Well, it's a big part of raising awareness. I think that's really the main thing that it does. Our billboard campaigns are what American Atheist is known for, that we get a lot of media attention for it, which is intentional. We sometimes, or like last year, for example, we chose a location in Times Square, and we knew that we would get a lot of people physically seeing that, which is great. But really, the way that we pick our locations is not so much about the number of people that see them. Like for this year, we intentionally chose places that are near schools, that are near churches, because we wanted to get a discussion going among everyday people in their everyday lives. And that was intentional, but it's also for media attention. We understand that the press is watching this, and we get a lot more exposure to these designs and to our message through TV and people rebroadcasting our billboards than anyone would ever see just driving by. But yeah, so as far as our message of raising awareness, of getting the discussion going, of helping people start this conversation, understand that talking about atheism is not taboo, that this is something that it's okay to talk about. I think we've succeeded very well and are succeeding very well with this type of approach.
Well, thank you for everything that you're doing, and it's a pleasure to have you here again, Danielle.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
So, Randy, you look like you're burning with anticipation for having a question.
Not quite a question. I was going to point out to any listeners that Jeff for Justice is trying to get in. He's having technical issues, but if we can't get him in, I'd like to reschedule him sometime. It's just unfortunate we couldn't get him in on the call.
That is very unfortunate, and we will just drive on right from that. I mean, we do have an all-star panel of guests here tonight, and I'm pretty sure we are overqualified to deal with the topic at hand tonight. So we'll just continue on, and if he gets in here, it would be great to have him join the conversation. But let's drive on with the amazing guest we have at our disposal tonight. So with that actually being the case, let's throw the conversation in the direction of Damien. What is it like being an activist on the hard streets of California?
Well, California, it's not too bad. It really depends on where you go, the response that you get. I mean, most people, you know, that are believers in California, I think they have this belief that they just have the right to tell you, you know, that you're wrong, and they don't even have to debate you. It's almost like they just feel like, you know, if they inform you that they'll pray for you and that you're wrong, then they just keep walking. I've had a lot of people do that. My best really response is when I went out on International Friendship Day, and I had a sign that just said, you know, we're atheists and we support friendship. And I said, you know, give me a hug, give me a high five or a thumbs up, or, you know. And I really, it was wonderful because I didn't realize. I went to the International Surfing Contest is where I did the outreach, and I didn't realize that Christians had been showing up for an entire week with like 10 different Christian groups with all kinds of signs burning, you're going to go to hell, and me being just really, you know, laid back and friendly, the response was absolutely amazing. I mean, people, or even Christians, were saying thank you for being here, because it's funny to see an atheist actually pushing what I think is the Christian message, you know, to just love everybody, which, of course, I don't think it's a Christian message, but I mean. So I mean, but I've also had times where, you know, one guy, you know, I thought he was going to physically fight me, and I was sitting down. I stood up, and I'm 6 foot 400 pounds, and he decided he didn't really want to fight me. So.
I'm glad nobody started fighting. That's good.
It is a good point that nobody actually started trading fists. That would be a counterproductive action towards a peaceful protest demonstration. So I'm glad it didn't break into a brawl.
Yeah, I wasn't going to throw any fights. It's just he told me I had no right to be out here, and I was sickening and disgusting, and how dare I, you know, say bad things about God, and, you know, and I mean, he was being very physically aggressive.
We had a similar situation earlier this year. Dave Silverman from American Atheist was out with us protesting to support the kid who got arrested for standing in front of the Jesus statue. I don't know if you all remember that. He was arrested for what do they call it?
Like desecrating was.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Desecration.
Yeah.
There's actually a law in the books in Pennsylvania that makes it illegal to act in a way offensive to someone's beliefs with a revered object. And, you know, it's never really been tested except by this one DA who decided to make an example out of this kid. So we went out to protest that. And while we were doing the protest, this local... he calls himself a reporter, but he's really kind of just a guy with a YouTube channel who likes to run around and get in people's faces. and he was trying to pick a fight with us because we didn't want to let him bully this kid who showed up at the protest. And if you go out, the video is out on YouTube. If you watch it, I kind of when he started squaring off against the guy from Truth Wins Out, Wayne Besson, and I kind of just slid my body right between the two. And I'm in the 6 foot 400 pound category as well. And that didn't. He kind of looked at me and he kind of took a step back, and meanwhile I called the police and got them involved. But it was kind of funny to watch his backpedal a little bit.
So let's actually.
It's interesting to hear. Go ahead, Mike.
Let's direct the conversation to Albany. Albany, you have a question?
Yeah, Damien, I have a question specifically for you. I know when you were talking about being at Pride with your booth, that many of the people there at Pride were surprised to see you, and they were talking to you about the Christians being there, and they love us anyways. And I'm honestly surprised to hear that. I am a new atheist. I've only been an atheist for about 6 months now. But I suppose, when I was Christian and very, very, just not where I am now, I figured anyone who was gay was an atheist, always liberal. So I suppose I'm kind of surprised to hear that so many at Pride didn't realize that many atheists support them unconditionally. They love them unconditionally because they're people. It doesn't matter if they're gay or straight or otherwise. And I guess my question to you is, what do you think that atheists, many atheists at home that maybe don't have a YouTube channel, don't have a Facebook, what would you recommend to them that they can do to really bring about awareness, whether it's maybe a bumper sticker or just protesting, peaceful protesting? What would you say to people to help the LGBT community know that there are atheists out there that support them as people?
Well, I think the important issue you said right there is basically do all the above. I have stickers on my car that support secularism, out atheism, and marriage equality. And I think that on my Facebook page, I am extremely out atheist, but I've also constantly say stuff about gay rights, and I think that it's something that people are. I was actually very shocked at how many people were surprised. That I was there, and that they didn't know anything about atheism. I was even more shocked that so many of the people that were gay had no clue about what atheism is. In fact, a couple of people asked me if I was a Satanist, and I said, yeah, but you see that's a belief in the anti-deity. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in any supernatural beings. But I think the other thing was that how welcome they were to have me there. I really felt like they were really happy, truly happy to have me there. In fact, some of the people said they still believed in God, but they were still happy that I was there because they feel like, it's like this mob of Christians all trying to, I don't know if they're trying to prove they love gays or I don't know if they just want to convert people to Jesus or what the thing was, That, but I think also was that people wanted to ask me, was I trying to convert people to atheism? And I told them, no, I'm not trying to convert people to anything. All I want to do is offer a message, that you can live a life, superstition-free, and that you can love and care about people, and you don't need gods or anything to have value for life or people.
When all that stuff was going on with Atheism Plus, and people were arguing back and forth, we did a segment on our show in which I specifically talked about how it was shocking to me the first time I met an atheist that was anti-gay, anti-marriage equality, making slander, versus against trans people. It blew me away because I thought, there's nothing causing you to hold on to that, be that reason for being judgmental. And so I remember going off that, I'm not in favor of making a forum where people are getting blocked and pushed away and this little internal bullying thing, but at the same time I understand the shock when you meet an atheist. I was the editor of American Atheist magazine for a couple of years. We did a cover photo of one of the magazines of the Proposition 8 protest in California, I received probably 20 emails of people pissed off saying, this isn't a damn gay rights magazine, get that crap off the cover of my magazine. And I was floored, right? I was floored. I'm like, what? Right? Well, so I do this episode of Dogma Debate where I go off on these people saying, what the hell is your excuse? What do you possibly have to hold against gay people? Or what do you possibly have to hold against anyone? And shockingly, because I made the comment that if I'm marching, and of course I say stuff on the air, it's a live radio show, it just comes flying out of my mouth. What I said was, I don't know if I worded it correctly, but I said something like, if we are marching or protesting together, what makes you think I want to march right next to you as we are demonstrating for equality for secular people, and you're right next to me marching, yet you don't think gays should be treated as equal? I don't want to march next to you, and I made this bold statement of, I'm drawing a line, I'll separate myself from atheists who don't support marriage equality. And I made that blank statement. I got a message from a gay Christian that said, you were talking about your own inner circle of atheists, saying, I don't want to march next to atheists who don't support gays. Gay Christian. And he said, what makes you think I want to march with a damn atheist? And I was just like, wow, I mean that being judgmental, it blows me away. I've got a gay friend who I sit down and talk to about marriage equality, gay rights. We're right on point. He's Catholic, and says horribly offensive things about anyone who's transgender. And I start arguing with him, a gay man, defending people who are transgender, because he says he doesn't get it, it's weird, it's gross, it's dumb, it's stupid. I'm like, look what you're doing. Look what you're doing to yourself. So it really makes me step back and go, okay, wait a minute. Being an atheist doesn't mean a damn thing except that you've let go of a belief of a deity. That is it. That is it. There are libertarian atheists, there are Republican atheists, there are gay-hating
all
atheists,
walks of life.
There are atheists who are spiritual, there are atheists who are superstitious. I mean,
That's actually where we're coming in and understanding that secularism or an atheistic mindset is only a small dynamic of the individual for itself.
Exactly. That's why what we try to
all flavors of the rainbow and in all different mindsets. I mean, I've come in contact with a gay Republican atheist in the past, and that's something that basically threw my head for a loop. Somebody that's part of the LGBT community, that's a Republican, that's an atheist. That's something that I didn't even think that existed in our community, yet it's there. So if that's there, anything can be found in the secular community.
Well, and that's why we strive to push for not atheism, but skepticism, secularity, and reasonable critical thought. That is what's really important. If people are reasonable and think critically and apply skepticism to multiple parts of their life, atheism will happen naturally.
What I found.
So I want to ask you a quick question. Sorry, for Danielle. I'm just curious. I wanted to hear your answer for this previous question, which was, I mean, what do you think we can do to better push the message of gay rights? Does it feel like that's not gotten out there enough from our community?
Absolutely, I think that it hasn't, and I think that there's a lot that we can do to help that happen, and it's going to be slow going, particularly because there's not necessarily animosity, but there's hesitance to work together. I saw this back when I was a student at the University of Missouri, and our atheist group wanted to work together with the LGBT group on campus. Even though they were all atheists, they were the officers of the group, they were concerned about driving away non-atheist people to their group as far as it being a safe space for silbert people. And I mean, that was many years ago. Even now, with much greater public awareness of atheism, with Dave Silverman in charge of American Atheists and us doing these nationwide media campaigns. Not that atheism awareness didn't exist before that, of course, but it's getting better now, but we're not there yet. American Atheist has actually just started working with Creating Change. If you're familiar with that conference, it's a huge conference, about 4,000 people, like 4 times the size of the American Atheist Conference, that's put on each year by the Gay and Lesbian Task Force, which recently changed its name to the LGBT Task Force. And we're trying to get together basically a track. Like they have these like different workshop tracks, throughout the day. You can choose what you're going to, but we're trying to put together a track about atheism, because there is so much overlap between atheists and LGBT people, and the activism that happens between those two communities. I think a lot of people don't really realize this, but about 50% of LGBT people are not religious, which is 2.5 times the number of people who are not religious of the general population. And it's really not a mystery why that is, right? I mean, atheists, a lot of them are pushed away from religion because of their support of progressive social policy and attitudes in general. And a lot of LGBT people, for very obvious reasons, are pushed away from religion because of their progressive attitude about acceptance of LGBT people. So these are natural allies. These are people that we should be working with. But I am absolutely tired of LGBT people. And I shouldn't just say LGBT people, but this idea that it's a good thing, rather, for the LGBT activism community to cater to religious people instead of catering to atheists who are on their side. Religious people are not on their side. Some of them are. There are some liberal Christians who choose to ignore even more of the Bible than other Christians, and that's really what it is. Okay, I mean they're just it's all pick and choose. It's all the cafeteria Christians. Just some of them also decide to ignore the gay stuff, and I'm glad because I'm trans. That's important to me that they do. But what we really should stress, I think, is just understanding that stuff is bullshit. That all of it doesn't make sense, and I don't really know where I stand on working together with progressive religious people. It sits very poorly with me. I don't like that idea. On the other hand, I also don't like infighting, and I am very much about focusing on a goal rather than focusing on who I'm working with. That doesn't mean that I will refuse to work with certain people who I dislike and I don't like their motives and so on. There are a lot of people who I refuse to work with on account of them being openly anti-feminist or being openly, whatever. But I think that continuing to do this sort of large-scale activism in addition to the small-scale stuff, I love things like pride parades. I love things like working together with local groups. But when we start really making a difference is when we start doing things like the big atheist conferences and the big LGBT conferences joining forces. That's where we can really make a big difference. When we start lobbying together, that's where we can make a difference in politics, understanding that we do have the same goals and that we are natural allies, and that by coming together we can make real change in the real world.
Well, that actually being a great answer. If I can just jump in for 1 second, I actually have a follow-up question for Danielle.
Mm-hmm.
What aspects of the Billboard campaign would you say are a rally call to secular-minded individuals and just the atheist community in general?
Well, so we actually have 2 sets of billboards up right now. We have 2 that are a response to a parody of our billboards. So let me just back up and go through the timeline a little bit. We put up 5 billboards that were aimed at in-the-closet atheists. Basically, the message being, if you are an atheist, that's fine, that's great, come to our convention, and don't feel like you have to drag your kids to church if you don't believe this stuff. It's okay to start that conversation. In response to those 5 billboards, a group of Christians in Memphis put up 2 billboards parodying our billboard campaign, saying that all we want is to celebrate our sacred day in peace. We want you to stop bullying us, and then some message about peace and love and harmony. Anyway, so we put up a second set of billboards in response to those billboards, these aimed at Christians, saying, "Dear Christians," it had a picture of a little girl on it, "Dear Christians, I share my toys, why won't you share the season?" So those billboards were aimed at religious people. The first set was aimed at in-the-closet atheists. So, I mean, just as far as your question about our message to in-the-closet, or our message to atheists, only part of our billboard campaign was about that. And it was really just more about getting the conversation going and helping people understand that it's okay, as I was saying before, it's okay to have this dialogue and to start this discussion, that atheism is not, I think I said not taboo is the way I worded it. And it isn't. This is something that it's great to talk about, and that's really what our major message is. It's a big part of our mission statement, is helping people understand that atheism is all over the place, that atheism is normal, that we are not somehow, you know, there's nothing wrong with us for lacking belief that your God exists. In fact, most of the world lacks belief that your God exists. If we're talking to Christians, you know, 5 out of every 7 people don't believe that. And just because they're the majority in this country does not mean that they run things. And that's what we want people to understand, Christians especially.
Well, with that actually being the case, if a small-town community of atheists wants to apply for a billboard, how would they go about doing that? I'm
sorry, if a community made up of atheists wants to billboard?
A small-town community of atheists, or just a small little meet-up atheist group wants to apply to have a billboard in their local community.
Hey there, I can't hear anybody.
What they would have to go about doing?
Well, yeah, I mean, if a group wants a billboard, really all you need
seems to be off for some reason.
Hello?
That's Jeff. He just joined. I guess he's having some.
Oh, hi, Jeff.
Can you hear us, Jeff?
Jeff for Justice, can you hear us?
I can barely hear somebody.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Can you just turn up your volume?
Can you turn up your volume? You gotta love tech issues. That's what I'm basically finding out about this episode. If I have to deal with another tech issue in this episode, I'm going to take my laptop, throw it out the window, and I'm done. I hand over the mantle of the Age of Reason to Randy Bevan. That's all I got to say. But let's actually carry on. I hope Jeff for Justice can hear us. But you were actually in the process of answering.
Yeah. So I mean, we were just talking about how to put up a billboard if your group wants to do that, or if you want to do that as an individual. It's really not too difficult. It's a process of basically just coming up with the money and then approaching a billboard company with your message, and they can put together creative for you, or you can hire somebody to do it, or you can do it yourself. I would highly recommend having a professional do it because it'll look a lot better and lots of people are going to see it. One thing that I really want to stress is that we love to work with local groups. If you want to put up a billboard, please come to us, tell us, and we can help you put together that. We have people here who design billboards. I mean, that's part of our job, and we're happy to help put that together with a message that we both like. We might even split the cost with you if it's something that we want to co-sponsor. And we have contacts in the billboard industry, in the media industry, who can help get this out. The main thing that I want to stress about billboards is that we don't put up billboards for the people driving by to see them. I mean, we do, but what we're really shooting for is the media. We want more people to see it than would ever see it driving by. So it has to be a message that is going to get media attention if you want to get your money's worth. This is partly, not the only reason, but this is partly why you will never, or I'm not, never say never, of course, but this is partly why American Atheist does not do billboards that say things like you can be good without God. Because if we did, the only news coverage would be, hey, that's weird, American Atheist put up a non-aggressive billboard, right? But yeah, I mean, if you want media attention, which is the goal, when you're trying to spread a message, you need to be working with the media to do that. You have to be edgy. You have to. And if you want to talk to us about your idea for a billboard, I would love to talk to you about that. You can reach me at my office. Just go to atheists.org, and if you go to the staff page, my contact information is there. Or if you want to write this down, my phone number is 908. Oh, we got somebody in. My phone number is 908-276-7300, and my extension is 7. Anyone is welcome to call me.
I just barely heard
Hello?
somebody.
Oh, somebody's trying to come in. Yeah, I would love to talk to you about your idea for a billboard if you're a local group or just an individual with that idea. It's something that we do regularly. Like I mentioned earlier, the campaign that we're running right now actually has 5 billboards in 5 different cities. One of those, the one in Milwaukee, is co-sponsored with a local group, and we each put in half the money, and we put up the design together, and that's what's going on there.
Well, thank you for that, Danielle. It's always a pleasure to... And all links to that information will be in the bottom of this hangout in the finalization and ending of the episode, known as The Age of Technical Issues. So, with that actually being the case, let's toss it over to Albany. Albany, you had a question for one of our talented panel guests tonight?
Yes, Danielle, I have a question for you. Before my question, just a little spurt. My husband, we're younger, we're 23. He's a Roman Catholic. I'm a new atheist. I'm also pansexual. And the reason we work very well together is because he's incredibly accepting. He's always known I wasn't straight. The moment I told him that I became an atheist, he was 100% supportive, and he never tried to make me otherwise. And so much of his family is very against that. We've been together for 3 years. And one family member in particular, I mean, this woman absolutely hates atheists. I mean, when she found out I was gay, it was bad enough. When she found out I was an atheist, I mean, we're disgraceful, we're disgusting, we have no souls. And, well, we know that, but but I mean, we're terrible and terrible people, and, you know, God is okay with them hating us. And my question to you is, she is of the older generation, and I'm noticing lately that even the young Christians are really becoming to open up, and they're proud of their beliefs, many of, like my husband, but they also, like my husband, are very, you know what, your life does not affect me, and I don't see how even though I have a relationship with God, I should tell you what to do. And my question is, do you believe that as the older generations or newer generations begin to grow up and continue to grow up in a more open-minded, logical, and reasonable society, that a closed-off, ignorant mentality will also die off, I guess, with the generations?
Well, I mean, it is dying off. We're seeing that now. We're seeing, and the way that I like to explain this, at least the way that politics works, you know, you have your progressives and you have your conservatives, and they're fighting for control over this stuff, and it goes back and forth. I like to explain it like a pendulum clock, you know, like a grandfather clock that has the pendulum. So each election cycle, you know, it might come back this way more conservative or this way more liberal. Right now with Obama, you know, and we're a little bit more on the liberal side, but then, you know, with the Senate and the House and the Republicans having control of everything, we're back on the conservative side, and it goes back and forth, and that happens. But imagine this whole thing, this grandfather clock scenario, on a ship, and the ship is sailing this way. The ship, I don't know if I'm forwards or backwards here, but it's going to the left, okay? It's getting more progressive every generation. So it doesn't matter if it's getting more progressive or getting more liberal as it goes back and forth. Everything is getting more progressive, and that's great. That's something that we want to see. So, I mean, don't be discouraged by minor setbacks, you know, depending on who's getting elected. But the point is, we absolutely are seeing, as each generation goes by, people being more accepting. I mean, remember, you know, 60 years ago, 50 years ago, it was really no different in anyone's mind to think of a gay person the way that they think of a pedophile. And we are now, today, atheists are very regularly distrusted to the same degree. There was a study from, I think it was the University of British Columbia or somebody up there, that they had all these different groups of people, Muslims, gay people, rapists, atheists, all these different groups, and they asked them about, I believe it was certain amount it was a matter of trustworthiness, like would you trust these people to babysit your kids and blah blah blah. And the group that they rated at the bottom, along with rapists, was atheists. Like, they see us as about equal in terms of trustworthiness. So we obviously still have a lot of work to do, right? But it's getting better. I mean, it used to be that atheists could not walk around in the open wearing pins like this one that said A on it, or we would get shot or burned at the stake, or, I mean, whatever it was. But it is getting better, and I think it definitely has to do with generations, and it's going to keep doing that. 20% of, as I was saying before, of Americans now are non-religious. They're not all atheists, but they don't subscribe to a specific religion. But if you look at people who are what are called millennials in demographics, people who were born after 1980, it's 32%. And people generally do not go back to being very, very religious after they step into atheism or step more toward that type of liberalism. And I just think that's going to keep getting better and better as time goes by, especially with the internet age. I mean, you look at, any 7-year-old today is better with an iPhone than I am, and you can't lie to somebody that age and tell them this crap about Jesus dying for your sins and about because they can just look it up. They can say, no, that didn't happen. It says right here. And I think that we're just going to continue seeing progress as we go along.
Would you mind, sorry to jump in real quick, do you remember where that study came from? I would actually love to write it down and check it out myself.
I believe it was the University of British Columbia, and I can look it up and send it to you. But if you just look at, I know a bunch of atheist blogs and stuff reported on it, but if you Google something along the lines of atheists, rapists, University of British Columbia study, I'm sure you'll find it.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure, happy to.
Well, my question's actually for David. David, what is your thoughts as someone that actually used to be a member of American Atheist, of the achievements and the progress of something like the billboard campaign that is annually done by American Atheist?
I've been one of Dave Silverman's biggest critics. I think anyone who listens to my show knows that I've often disagreed with some of the things that he said or done, and I've been open about that, and I've been open about that directly to Dave. Dave's a good friend of mine, and I've seen just an amazing amount of professionalism in sort of how they've been tweaking what they do. It used to be, in my opinion, intentionally offensive, and that did definitely got the media attention. I'm talking years ago. It definitely got the media attention, and I don't know. My argument was always, I don't know how effective that's going to be. Yeah, you're getting media attention, but is it the right kind of attention? Are you just making us look like jerks, or are you actually reaching to people? And what I've noticed over the last probably 3 years is it's attention grabbing, but not just for the purposes of offending. It's attention grabbing, and it's effective. And so I'm absolutely a fan again. I mean, I was a fan, then I wasn't, and I'm back on board. I'm very supportive of everything that they've done, and I talked to Dave about this. He was one of my guests on our 24-hour live show, and we talked about that. We talked about some of the things. The one billboard I didn't like, I think it was a couple of years ago, that said, it's a myth. And the reason I didn't like that version is because I thought it was arrogant to tell someone what they didn't know or what they do know. And I think telling someone this is the case just makes them put up walls and get defensive and everything else. I would much rather make them think than tell them what they know, because I think that can be offensive. And so I really like where they're going with this billboard of the little girl with the Santa hat. And I happen to know the little girl, and I know she's amazing, and I know we can't talk about her identity, but I could totally see her begging to do that. She's an amazing little kid. And I think that the way they're going now, it's offensive enough to get attention, which is what they're going for, but it's effective enough to make you think. It doesn't just piss you off and make you go, oh my God, that's ridiculous. It makes you go, what? Maybe that's the case. Let me think how I can argue against that. And so Dave and I talked about it at length during his hour. During the broadcast. I don't even know if it's yesterday or today or 3 days ago, because I've lost all sense of time at this point. But when he did talk about it, he said, you get it. I kind of reiterated back to him that in order to argue about it, they have to come up with a defense for it, right? And in coming up with that defense, they have to verbalize their own beliefs. and that's where they get in trouble. And I think that's where it's effective. So, yeah, I'm back on board, and I'm a huge fan of what they're doing. And I told Dave a long time ago, I said, look, when you're back on Fox News and O'Reilly gives you that 7-second window to talk before he interrupts you again, instead of using that 7 seconds to insult him, just use it to talk about equality. And he laughed about it, and he said, I try to, but sometimes I just can't help throwing in a pot shot. And I was like, I know. And so I've honestly seen more of that. I've seen more of the equality talking, less of the making fun of religion, and ultimately that's what it's about. So I'm very supportive of American atheism.
Well, we actually do have a question from the Q&A itself.
Can I respond to this?
Go ahead, Damien.
Yeah, I want to respond to this. To me, I think that I see this really as you're talking about civil rights issues, and no civil rights issues ever happen in silence. And in fact, it takes extreme acts of disobedience, often civil disobedience against laws that are unjust or practices that are unjust. And I think blasphemy as not just a law, but a mental attitude that we have no right to say something blasphemous is actually what I do intentional sometimes. Because I feel that blasphemy in this sense is my form of civil disobedience. I feel this is an absolute issue. So I don't try to be I try to attack thinking and not people, but I feel no problem, and in fact I completely support blasphemy.
Did something I said that I didn't support blasphemy?
No, I was just saying I wanted to address my view on the subject. I wasn't talking about for or against what you said. I just wanted to say my opinion about the importance of speaking out about, and we should have no problem saying things that are blasphemous.
It sounds like Damien would agree with the older Silverman pretty strongly. I think he likes the strong approach.
Yeah, I think we're effective when believers are interested in listening, and I think being blasphemous is fantastic. I agree with that. Civil disobedience is what it's all about. Telling someone, I know what you believe, I know what's in your head, and I'm telling you that it's ridiculous, I think that makes them look at us like, you have no clue what's in my head, I'm immediately going to shut you down. So that's why I thought that billboard was less effective. It was very effective at getting Dave on Fox News, and if that was the purpose, I guess it was successful regardless. But I have nothing against blasphemy. I want the Christian to think about what they're reading and about what they're hearing. And if they're immediately being told something that's obviously false, you can't know what someone else knows or doesn't know, then I think it's easier for them to shoot it down.
Brian?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Daniel.
I was just going to say, I think it depends on the audience, too. I mean, if your audience is closeted atheists who are pretending that they believe for the sake of their family or friends or coworkers or other people who know them, but they do know, and they know, they just don't want to say it. If that's your audience, then I think that billboard makes a lot of sense. If your audience is Christians, then it's understandably insulting. And I mean, I can relate to this personally because I've had a lot of run-ins with street preachers. It's a pastime of mine, and what came to mind instantly when you were talking about telling people what they know, despite what they're telling you they believe. This is a common trick of street preachers. They'll say that it's written in your heart. This comes from the Bible, that it's written on everybody's heart that God exists. I don't remember the exact verse, but and I'll say no, it isn't. Like I think I would know if I really did believe in God and I was just denying it. I don't believe in God. I'm telling you I don't. And I mean, there are plenty of people who say that there are no atheists because the Bible says there are no atheists, and that's crap. Obviously, there are atheists. But it is insulting to me when a religious person tries to insist that I know that there is a God, and I can totally understand why somebody who is religious would be just as insulted and take just as much offense if I tried to insist that there isn't, or tried to insist that they know that there isn't. Of course there isn't. But
I want to say one thing real quick. Everything that I've just said is going to be really shocking to people when you find out later the title of my next book. I can't say it now, but it's just going to be really funny. Keep in mind, you're going to think you contradicting jerk face. That's what you're going to be thinking, because that's kind of what it's about. It's exactly what it's about. And you're spot on. When Silverman came on the show to talk about it, that's exactly what he said. He said, David, your show is designed to talk to Christians. that billboard was not for Christians. That billboard was for atheists that know it's crap, that are sitting in church. That was for them. And that was our big conversation of understanding where we come from and understanding that there's an effective pathway for each individual type of activism. There's an effective way for the firebrand atheists, and there's an effective way for the more diplomatic atheists. And so that's what we came to terms with, is that we all have a place at the table because different strokes for different folks.
And I do want to say that even within the firebrand approach to advocacy for atheism, you can overdo it, and you can lose your audience if you're talking to religious people. It is one thing to go head on and say, look, the things that you're saying are demonstrably untrue. The things that you're saying don't make logical sense. You are incorrect. But if you push somebody too hard, they'll stop listening to you. And I think this is kind of what you were getting at too. There's a great analogy here, and actually I do a whole talk about this, about blasphemy, and the analogy in the talk has to do with clinical treatments of phobias. So the way that you clinically treat a phobia, and this was only discovered in like the 1950s, this is a relatively new thing, but basically it's all about baby steps. Like if you're trying to treat arachnophobia, for example, if you just jump right to, here, hold this spider, see, it's not going to hurt you. You're just going to freak the person out. You're going to trigger them. You're never going to get them any closer to not being afraid of spiders. But if you start out by saying, let's look at a cartoon drawing of a spider. See, it's harmless. It's not going to hurt you. It's and then you move from there to like a realistic drawing of a spider. That's if you go in those types of baby steps, and then a photograph of a spider. If you keep it going like that, then you can eventually get to the point where they can hold a spider and they won't freak out. But if you come in and you just start yelling at people and saying, what you believe is idiotic, you're not ever going to get through to them. You have to start off by having those sorts of rational discussions, by taking their hand and leading them there.
Exactly.
And that is a firebrand approach. That is directly addressing why they're wrong. But there's a proper way to do it, and there's a way to do it that is not productive.
Right, like I already said, that I always say attack thinking and not people. Attack the rational thought that's wrong, but I respect people. I believe in people. I just don't believe in religion or gods.
Well, let me say one thing about that. And every time I hear someone say that, I have to make this statement. For you and I, atheists, we have separated our worldviews from ourselves. You and I can have a rational discussion about things that we may disagree upon because we have not integrated ourselves with any particular worldview. And if we have, we continue to separate that out for ourselves. So I may like a certain football team, you like a certain football team, or I may like a certain sport, you don't like that sport. When you tell me the sport I like is dumb, I don't get angry at you because I have been able to separate myself from the things I enjoy. And what Freud noted in 1921 is that in order for a group to become successful, and David Eller actually wrote about this in his book that's actually published through American Atheist Press called Atheism Advanced.
Yep.
Published in 2007. It's marvelous. He's one of my favorite authors. He wrote the foreword to my first book, and I quoted him in my book, Baptized Atheist, also published through American Atheist. He says, Freud noted that in order for a group to strengthen, they need two things. They need opposition. Of course, you have to have opposition in order to build yourself, and you need, for individuals of that group, in order to become integrated into that group, they need to replace a piece of themselves with a piece of the group. And we see this happen at a football game where people have their shirts off and they have, Broncos painted across, and it's like 9 degrees outside, and they're out. Well, why? Why would they do that? Well, because the group getting the cheer, or the group seeing Broncos support, the group's ego has become more important than the individual's ego. The group integration has become more important than the individual being cold. So they are willing to suffer for themselves if it's better for the overall group. And in order for that to happen, they have to replace their own ego with the group of the ego. With the ego of the group itself. So what you find is when you attack something that's just an idea to you, for a religious person, what you may not realize is that person sees themselves as that belief. They have not broken a part of that. They are a part of that group. So when you attack the ideology and say, make fun of the idea, attack the idea, you don't realize that you're attacking the person even when you're not intending to. In the movie I was in, My Week in Atheism, John Christie, at the end of the film, says, you said you don't like Christianity. You said religion is oppressive. I am that religion. I am Christianity. Are you calling me oppressive? And I had to then break down, no, 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 no. I don't see you as that religion. That's how they view themselves. They see themselves as integrated with that. So when you start ripping on an idea and you're telling someone to just drop it, to just, let me just point out that logical fallacy, without even realizing it, you're effectively asking that person to remove a piece of themselves. And so when your audience is a Christian, be mindful of the fact that they have not systematically removed themselves from the group. So when you attack an idea, you may actually be attacking the individual, and you wonder why they get defensive. You're just talking about ideas. You're just talking about logical fallacies. You're just talking about biblical facts. For them, they are one and the same with those ideas.
David, that's actually a great point to enter in on with our question from the Q&A part of the Hangout. Now, we actually have a question from Earl Evans, who's actually a member of our staff here at Secular TV. He's actually our graphics guy. His question actually is, what sort of action can activists take in a state where a prohibition or a limitation towards atheists holding office is actually law? What can be used to shine a light on these types of laws and how limiting they are to secular activists or atheist activists in these types of states? Let's actually make that a question for all of our guests. Let's just go down the line. David, do you want to start with that, being in a state that's like Texas?
Sure, absolutely, and I actually did something today. Whether you want to draw publicity to it or whatever, that's different. Share it. Share it on social media, all the basic steps to get it out there. But Secular Coalition for America right now actually has a campaign where if you sign up for their email action alerts, if you were in one of the states that currently prohibits non-believers from holding office, you'll get an email. And I got one today that said, hey, here is, click here to take action. But you click there and you fill out this little form. It's your name, your email address, and your address. And then it actually pre-populates the email for you that can go to your local senators, and then it shows you the name and address of your senators, and you click submit, and the email goes to them. It took me maybe 4 minutes to do it, and I did it from my iPhone. So you can sign up at secular.org, you enter your email address, you'll get action alerts. That's definitely a great way. If you don't want to go through them, look up your congressman and congresswoman, look up your senators, write them directly, and definitely bring attention to it on social media. Let people know that this is ridiculous. And the last thing I want to say about it before we move on to another guest is when you get pushback from other people in your community that say, it doesn't matter, that's not enforceable anyway, it doesn't matter, it's not constitutional, it'll never hold up. We heard about it. We heard about all sorts of stories that were happening in which, no, technically it may not be constitutionally enforceable, but it would delay somebody 5 years from becoming a notary public or becoming a congressman or congresswoman. I mean, you have to go through the court steps. It's expensive. Basically you feel like you're being harassed by a law. So yes, write your congressman and congresswoman, share it on social media, and when people try to tell you it's not a big deal because it's not legal, it doesn't matter. It is slowing people down, it is causing an issue, and it should not be on the books.
Yeah, I mean, along the same lines, just to bring this back to what Brian was talking about earlier, the law in Pennsylvania that says that you can be arrested for desecrating an object that's held in reverence by people, I mean, that's clearly not constitutional either. But it is on the books, and as soon as somebody, as soon as there was a situation that came up where somebody decided to put this law into effect and to use it, this messed up a kid's life. He did something that should not have been illegal, that constitutionally was within his right to do. It was distasteful, but he did it, and he should have not been arrested for it. But as a result, he had to. He didn't actually. He wasn't convicted. It's my understanding. Actually, Brian, you might have more information about this.
Actually, it's a lot more complicated than that, and I can touch on it if you guys want to.
The point that I'm making, though, is that it's not like nothing happened just because this law on the books was unconstitutional.
A lot happened.
Yeah,
it really did get bad for the kid, and I can explain that.
Yeah, it's having unconstitutional laws on the books is extraordinarily harmful to people, even if they are very rarely enforced or they would never be enforced, quote unquote. It is not good to have those there, aside from the fact that they just send very much the wrong message about the role of government and our relationship to it. This is something that we should fight. And I also want to say, aside from doing things like writing to your lawmakers, which is also very helpful, meeting with your lawmakers in person is even more helpful. And this is something that a lot of people never ever do because they don't even know where to start. And there's a wonderful book. It's extraordinarily short. It's like this thick. You can read it in one sitting. It's by a great friend of mine, my boss actually, managing director of American Atheist, Amanda Knief, who's also a lawyer, and she used to work for the Iowa legislature writing laws, and then later worked for the Secular Coalition of America. She's done lobbying. She definitely knows this stuff, both sides, from the government side and from the lobbying side. And again, she's a lawyer. Her book is called The Citizen Lobbyist, and you can get it from the American Atheist Bookstore at atheists.org/shop. And it teaches you, and like I said, in one sitting, how to go about meeting with lawmakers and explaining to them why these issues matter to you as constituents, what you would like lawmakers to do to make these sorts of changes that help you, and why they need to listen to you if they want to stay in office. I think that's something that a lot of people don't really understand, is that you have the power as a constituent, as a voter, to make these sorts of changes, and it's really easy to do. You just have to make your voice heard. And this book, The Citizen Lobbyist, can teach you how to do that.
Now, let's actually pass this question on to Damien.
Yeah, I think that it's really important to constantly inform yourself and try to help inform others. Especially the fact that, like they were saying, that everybody really makes a difference. Everybody that speaks out, the more people that does that, you know, the better it's going to result. And I'm also a member of Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and I think that that's a really good organization to help keep, you know, religion out of politics in general. And I think it's important to really join up with groups like that. But I think also we can do, speaking back to the activism thing, activism on a local level. I've gone out and protested, you know, the Hobby Lobby because I disagree with you know, what they did. I did it twice at two different Hobby Lobbies, and I think that it's basically showing that you know, we care, and that, you know, we're not going to stand by for, you know, the laws that are just unjust.
You actually make some great points there, and thank you for actually touching on them. Let's actually toss this over to the person that's had a personal experience with this type of situation, though. Brian, what's your opinion on this question, and what is your general overview, given the personal experience you've had with a situation like this?
Well, the first thing I want to bring to everyone's mind, just so that they understand, with what happened to this kid in the end, is that the local legal system, to be frank, screwed him over. What they did was they went to a hearing, and the judge was very much in support of the DA and in support of punishing this kid, regardless of the legality of this particular law or anything like that. And they got an agreement with the kid's mother that he would have to serve, and I forget the exact number, but it was in the hundreds of hours of community service in order as punishment for what happened. And the way it works is that he wasn't even convicted. What they did was they came up with an agreement that this kid would agree to serve this punishment in lieu of trying it, so that it would not be on his record. But because there was the weight of the law and the weight of the legal system behind pressuring this mother, who obviously just wanted to get this out of the public limelight and all this other stuff and just wanted to move on with their lives, they pressured this family into punishing this kid to avoid something ending up on his permanent record. So he's got to serve hundreds of hours of community service because you had a DA who basically whose word is law in that particular area of Pennsylvania. And the mother, because she for various reasons, and it's completely understandable that as a mother you don't want to use your child as to make public statements when you can take a way out that may seem better for your family. But by the same token, what happens to this kid learns entirely the wrong lesson, and that is that we don't have free speech in Pennsylvania because this one DA interpreted the law this one way this one time, which is a big problem.
Well, I don't even think it was an interpretation. I mean, that law was on the books. He's just the first person to use it, right?
Well, now you have to understand, and there's some because Dave Silverman and I talked about ways to do civil disobedience with this.
Okay.
We thought about bringing our own cross or something like that, and perhaps desecrating it in public in a way that would be considered in violation of the law.
Okay.
The DA had decided that the reason why he was going to prosecute this particular law in this particular way is because this kid did it on someone else's property.
Okay.
Now, that's not part of the law, but the DA is choosing to interpret the law in a particular way that our only choice for civil disobedience is to do something which would be ethically questionable, which would be to repeat what the child did.
Right. Well, specifically, okay, so just to be clear here, he was not charged, the child was not charged with trespassing, if you're unfamiliar with
Correct.
this case. Right. Although that was illegal that he did that, which is why...
No,
Right.
it was not illegal. He was not trespassing. If you look at the trespassing law,
Okay.
he wasn't trespassing because he was on the outside of the property. He hadn't entered the property. There was no trespassing signs, and it was a place of business. So you can go on to a place of business
Okay.
and do something that's not harmful to that business's property without being charged with trespassing. Now, if you're asked to leave
Right.
and you refuse to leave, that's trespassing.
Gotcha.
But none of that took place.
Okay. Interesting. I wasn't aware of that part of it.
Yeah, so this is a circumstance where the DA took a particular interpretation of the law and beat this kid up with it. I mean, and I'm not exaggerating to say that. He took his interpretation because he was morally outraged by this child's actions. He decided to interpret the law in a specific way and persecute this child with it.
But
As a
I mean,
follow-up to this question, not to...
And I have something else I want to say too, but yeah. Go ahead.
I will get right back to you, Brian, right after I do a follow-up to this question with Danielle. What organizations, if someone finds himself in this type of situation with a law like this, can atheists reach out to help with a situation like this? Is Freedom from Religion Foundation one of them? Is American Atheist? What organization should they be looking for help from?
well, American Atheist is very happy to talk to you about this sort of thing. This is exactly what we do. If you have a separation of church and state issue that you're facing, specifically discrimination because you're an atheist, or anything having to do with the government showing endorsement or implying endorsement of a specific religion over other religions and non-religion, or over religion generally versus non-religion. That's unconstitutional. That's exactly the type of thing that we fight. If this is a situation that you're facing, we really want you to get in touch with us. And you can contact me directly for this, and I can put you in touch with the right person. You can email us confidentially on our website if you would prefer to do it that way. This is what we do. We fight for you. So please get in touch with us. We'd be happy to talk to you about what's going on.
Well, thank you. Go ahead.
In this particular situation, you have to understand that there were several civil rights organizations, including American Atheists, that offered to help this kid. And this was a circumstance where the mother, out of fear for her family and the effects that this type of law would have on, fighting this law would have on her family, chose to try to make this go away as painlessly as possible, which is an understandable reaction from a mother for her child. But in this particular circumstance, there's nothing that any one of us could have done without the mother's support, and because the DA did what he did in such a specific way, it really creates a problem for us to try to help other people. But I will say, to answer the original question, which was about what should you do to do activism and get involved, and there were a lot of great ideas thrown out here, but I do want to heavily recommend the Secular Coalition for America had a 50-state program, and it's not just a matter of signing up for the alerts or responding to these alerts or writing your senator, congressman, or whatever. Get involved. Get involved with your state chapter, and do it in an organized way where you can lobby with the Secular Coalition. Help us. I am the co-chair for the Secular Coalition for Pennsylvania, and if you can help us canvass these senators and representatives in your state government, that will go a long way. You can where you really can start to make change is when you start to establish friendships and relationships with the representatives themselves and their gatekeepers, and you can actually directly affect policy. And it's wonderful to be able to do that, but we all need help with it. So if you can get involved with that, I really want to encourage that.
Well, thank you for that, Brian. It's great information there, and we will make sure to use that when the time arises. We also do have a surprise Q&A guest, which is an amazing individual, and I have nothing but love for. Jeremiah, welcome to The Age of Reason.
How are you, my friend?
I cannot complain,
going,
my
man?
friend. It's always a pleasure to have an activist on when we're talking about activism.
Right. And I've done activism on both sides.
That's something that's even rarer. So thank you for being here tonight. So do you have any questions for our very, very, very knowledgeable panel of guests that we are honored to have tonight?
Originally, I was going to tell you no, because I wasn't here this entire time, and I don't know what question's been asked, and I'd hate to be the guy who asked the question that's been asked a whole bunch of times in different ways, and everybody's like, dude, that sucks. But I'll throw this one out there anyway, and if it's been asked already, I apologize in advance. Do you believe as activists that you should have a diversity of tactics within your arsenal? And whether they be direct actions or whether they be that on one far end of the spectrum and maybe on the other end of the spectrum, having very soft kind of, I guess, almost what Francis Schaeffer would call pre-evangelism, you know, that when you talk to people in casual conversation without even having to say words necessarily about the topic you're hoping to convince someone of, just the mere conversation and the way it's taking place, that's priming them for conversations of that nature. And how do you believe people could best equip themselves in a diverse way to make different kinds of encounters rather than just a very hard one or a very soft one? If that makes any sense at all, and I apologize if it's...
David Smiley looks like he has a great answer for that question, so let's pass the ball to him.
I did touch on this a little bit earlier, but I guess overall, I think whatever you're passionate about, whatever fits your personality, whatever fits with what you would like to see happen in whatever movement you're in, apply the best of what you have with what you're most passionate about. I think that's ultimately the best thing to do. And so if you are a writer, if you're gifted with writing and words, absolutely, you know, do that. And if you get an opportunity to be on a podcast or to do a live radio show or to make videos, do that. If you're a video editor, do that, of course. So not only should each individual sort of survey the land of options to see how many things they can be involved in, but we all need to sort of work together as one big community to highlight and help everyone else improve everything else that they're already doing and working on. So I would never say, well, you know, I'm not a writer, so I don't want to talk to bloggers, or I am a writer, so I don't want to talk to podcasters. I would never say those. It's all going to come together as a cohesive unit. That's the best way we can be effective, is to have the largest arsenal at our disposal as possible.
And just to sort of add to the point that David was making there, it's understanding that there are many variables that can be used when it comes to taking on a topic, when it comes to taking on a subject that you are an activist for. You are not the only one that is facing a hurdle or a challenge when it comes to being an activist. Find people that are fighting for the same cause and go with the strengths of the group. You are as strong as the size of your group and the variables or the talents you have at your disposal. The more talent you have in the group itself, the more successful your call to activism will be. Randy?
Well, I just wanted to add to this one particularly because, as some people may know, may or may not know, I make a series on my channel, Foxhole Atheist, called Yelling at Stupid People. And while I have a lot of videos on my channel that I'm very calm and rational and passionate, yelling at stupid people is not any of that. It is vulgar, it is angry, it's loud. And for me, I think that this is like wearing multiple hats. What we call in the Army, the military, wearing more than one hat. And you have to be able to have those different approaches, have a whole arsenal of tools at your disposal, I think, to fight bad ideas. And so if you only have one approach, I feel like you may be a little limited. There may be people you can't reach. I think we need all kinds. We need the firebrands. We need the soft-spoken people. And we need people who will use both of those tactics at the same time.
That's actually a great point. Anything you want to add to this? Albany?
Who?
Oh,
You just muted yourself.
sorry. My internet has been lagging.
To the technical issues of tonight. Albany, do you have anything you would like to add tonight?
Truthfully, I am just I'm glad that this all has opened my mind to realizing just how much atheists need to continue to be outspoken. They need to be, if they're able to, and in a safe environment, to not be scared about reaching out to others and letting others know that they're there, whether it's from the LGBT community, knowing that atheists support them. But I'm really happy to have had this, and everyone here, thank you all, because it's just going to encourage me specifically, and I'm sure many more watching this, to be more outspoken and help people understand that we are there for them.
Great points, Albany. Since we're actually getting close to the time we should be ending, let's actually go into asking this question to the last three people here, and then go into our closing thoughts on what we've actually discussed tonight. So, Danielle Moscato, what's your thoughts on the question that Jeremiah posed?
Well, I think it's never a bad idea to be fluent in more than one type of activism language, I guess is the way you could put it. It depends on your purpose, it depends on your audience, it depends on your message. There's all sorts of things that you might use one strategy over another strategy. But I think a lot of it also depends on what you're good at and where your personality is. I'm a firebrand. I was not always a firebrand. I became a firebrand the more I became exposed to the harms that religion causes. The more I realized how much of a mismatch is between what religious people claim they're doing as far as helping people and making the world a better place versus the actual harms that they're causing to people in the real world and making their lives more miserable and causing suffering. The more I was exposed to that, the more that I saw what they were doing, and the more stories that I heard from people who were actually being hurt instead of just hearing it from the religious people telling me how they were helping, the more I realized that I couldn't support that anymore. And I slowly became less and less of a diplomat and more of a firebrand. And I am not good at being a diplomat. I think I can when I really need to be, but it's not something that comes very naturally to me. Something that comes very naturally to me is talking about how harmful religion is and why we need to fight it. and I am not the best person to talk to when you're looking for a diplomat. I think that it's, like I said, it's useful to be able to do both. But if your passion and your attitude is somewhere else, don't force it. I think the most important thing, and I don't think any atheist is really going to disagree with this is part of what makes us different, really, is that we care very much about authenticity, about intellectual honesty, and being true to what we really think and how we really feel about something. And I can't sit quietly and pretend that religion is okay, because it's not. And I mean, that's why I work for American Atheists and not the American Humanist Association. I used to work for the Secular Student Alliance, and it wasn't a great fit for me. I love everybody there. I give a lot of money to the Secular Student Alliance, but I could not do communications for them because it would require doing a lot of interfaith stuff, which I don't like to do. But as far as being able to do different types of approaches, it's always better to have a bigger toolbox. But don't use tools that you're not good at using, or you could hurt yourself.
Very good. You all. So
I
don't know how many more people there are, but you guys have all done well at answering this question. This is interesting. I just jumped into something I had no clue what I was going to expect, and that
That's
was.
why you
It was a
are
fantastic question, Jeremiah.
That's why you were as epic as always, Jeremiah. I mean,
I practice in the mirror.
You should. You don't even need a mirror. You are a reflection all your own. But let's actually pose this question to the last two members of the panel that haven't answered it yet. Brian, Damien, would one of you like to jump in on this?
Sure, I'll jump in on it. And I do it all the time. I mean, I don't have one style. I'm a firebrand atheist, but I also believe in firebrand humanism. I constantly talk about the need to care for people. To me, if you asked me what's more important, my disbelief or my care for humanity, to me it's actually the same question. To me, disbelief is a promote of humanity. And to me, belief, to me personally, separates the belief in humanity. Because to put a God or a religion is to put humanity in the back seat. And so for me, it's the same thing. And I post poems all the time, and I post sayings. To me, so it's not really a question of either or. I do both. Because to me, in general, when love is followed, hate is not tolerated. And that to me is one of the things that I try to push as much, that people matter, people have value, and people ask, why do I do things? It's really because I care. I mean, I don't expect people to change. I really care about them, and I want them to have the opportunity to change if they like to. Because I knew that I was a believer for 36 years. I never questioned or doubted God at all. And it was only going to college and hearing stuff that I was given the opportunity to know that there's something else, and that changed my whole life. I used to hate people. I used to be very conservative. I was bigoted. I hated homosexuals. I mean, I thought we're supposed to hate. That's what the Bible taught. I mean, so to me, really atheism is the message of hope. It's the message of love, of freedom for me, and I want to give that opportunity to other people.
Well, thank you for that, Damien. Brian, do you want to touch on it?
I'm going to. I think I'm going to challenge the premise of the question a little bit, and I know that kind of throws things for a loop sometimes, but I'm
always for someone that's going to challenge Jeremiah, because it just brings out the best in him. So feel free to challenge him if you want to.
Here's the thing: I see that, and every time that question gets asked, and I know in our movement we've had the huge discussion over the argument between firebrands and diplomats and all that other stuff, and I honestly think that it's a distraction, in that I think that when you're doing activism right and you're doing activism well, you're doing it by identifying a goal, defining a means to reach that goal, and measuring your success based on how you've reached the goal. And that in particular circumstances, particular means are called for that are both firebrand and diplomatic, or mixtures in between, or maybe an extreme of one end or another. But if you're actually trying to accomplish something, getting hung up on the means of accomplishing it, I think, is an absurd waste of our time. That if you're going to have a debate, let's have a debate about the effectiveness of a particular approach to a particular goal and a particular problem with a particular solution, and that any argument that would say, well, let's take a one-size-fits-all approach to every goal is unreasonably absurd. So you have to
go with you on this one, Brian.
You have to look at the context.
I've got to go with you on this because when you actually put someone into a cookie-cutter mold, when you try to classify them under a label or a general stereotype, that's where you basically run the risk of counting the person out before they even get the chance to shine as an activist. You basically run the chance of putting them into a mold and limiting the actions they can do because of what you expect from the mold in which you think they exist as.
But some of those people are self-identifying.
Well, but that's the thing. I think if you self-identify, for example, as a firebrand, that might come with certain connotations. And you self-identify as what somebody would say is a diplomat. That might come with certain connotations. But I honestly think that if you're going to be effective, that you have a toolbox that you keep with all the tools at your disposal that you can make available, but you take a look at the task at hand. And of course, like anything else, if you're not capable of taking on that task, maybe you pass on that project, but you still have to look at the project in the context of itself rather than in the context of trying to apply one solution to every task. I don't think that works.
Yeah.
I just want to add on something about this, though. I completely agree with what you're saying, that you don't want to force people into one mold or another mold if that's not the best fit for them, and consider your goals and consider all these other factors when you're trying to figure out the best way to solve a specific problem. But how you identify also depends on what label you're using, or I think I said that backwards. But the point that I want to make is it's part of our mission at American Atheists to help normalize atheism, to help atheism be something that is recognized in America as a class of people. That's not the right word. I don't mean a class of people, but as a category of people who are here and who exist and who contribute to society, who are productive in society, and who are not scary and so on. And part of the way that we do that, part of what we encourage people to do, is to self-identify publicly as atheists. And so what I want to say about that is that whether you're a diplomat or a firebrand, there are connotations to using certain labels over other labels that can lead you toward one versus the other. So generally when people hear the word atheist, they tend to assume that you're a firebrand, versus when they hear that you self-identify as a humanist, they tend to assume that you're not. But it doesn't have to be that way. I am both a humanist and an atheist, but I use the word atheist when somebody asks me what I am because I want to destigmatize that word. And the way that you destigmatize something is by desensitizing people who are sensitive to it, which is why we encourage people to say I'm an atheist, to use that word. So what I'm saying is, even if you're a diplomat, we still want you, I mean, at least it's the mission of American Atheists to encourage people, we still want you to call yourself an atheist. You can be somebody who has a secular Jewish background and call yourself an atheist. You can be somebody who has a secular humanist background, call yourself an atheist. You can be somebody who has a culturally Christian background who no longer believes that and call yourself an atheist. You don't have to say that you're a cultural Christian. All of those types of other labels, all of them, those and the related ones, spiritual but not religious or whatever, they all just they break down into much smaller and much less activist useful categories when we could all be using the same label and showing ourselves to be a much bigger community, the bigger community that actually we already are. And this is something that LGBT people have kind of figured out a very interesting way of solving this problem. So, of course, with LGBT, I'm not making this up. I have seen this in writing. LGBTQIA. Okay, this stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, with the little star for transsexual, and then you have queer, questioning, intersex, and ally and asexual. So that's everybody, right? So what we do is, instead of using one term where we can all fit in, even though it's quite vast, we separate them all out. We say, I'm an atheist, but, no, this person over here is a humanist, this person over here is a secular Jew, and it makes us look like there aren't as many. And that's a big problem when we're trying to accomplish activist goals in politics. It's a huge problem when we're trying to accomplish activist goals in the media, especially like demographic surveys. When Pew Forum comes around and they ask you, are you an atheist, and only 2% of people say yes. But when you ask the question, do you believe in a God or a higher power, and 12% of people say yes, or say that they do not, rather. I mean, we could be reporting that 12% of this country is atheists if we actually just used that word. It would make such a difference. Yeah.
I agree with that.
That's actually a great point. Or go ahead, Brian, and then I'll jump in with the.
Well, just to finish out what I was saying. I mean, I'm not suggesting that we start using an initialism for all the different atheist labels. I think that has worked well for the LGBT. I tend to say LGBTQ, but you know what I mean. It has worked well for that community. But even though they have some things that they work on together, they have things that they don't. Like, for example, a lot of trans people have very little interest or even anything in common with gay rights activism. They're not gay. They don't identify with that community. It's not. I mean, some trans people are also gay, but they just kind of got lumped in because they have something to do with sexuality, gender / whatever, and they have civil rights issues at stake. But it's a totally different type of activism to be fighting for the right to use the bathroom that's appropriate for you versus the right to get married. It's a completely different activism goals, but they're able to work together because they're united under one label. And I think that's something that atheists need to do, and I suggest that we use the word atheist because there's no question what that means. Nobody knows what a humanist is unless you're already in the atheist community. Nobody does. And I think it just hurts our cause to talk about secular Jews, which suggests to people that you are religious, or to use the word humanist, which is just confusing for a lot of people. We should use the term atheist. Everybody knows what that means, and it helps us accomplish our goals to a much greater degree.
Great points, Danielle.
Can I say something if it's not combative? As a final thought, actually, to you, you're the one I was wanting to say something to.
Jeremiah, can I say a final thought before you?
Well, it's your show, man. You can technically say anything.
I would like to think I can, but thank you, Jeremiah. I just want to say that make sure your toolbox is versatile. Make sure that it can take on a multi-based, situationally extravagant situational base. Make sure you can take on any situation that comes your way in short, would be my advice. And don't let terms or don't let stereotypical ideologies or terms like firebrand or diplomat be the thing that decides the type of person you are at the end of the day. With that actually being said, though, let's let Jeremiah give his little... Go ahead, Brian.
Let me toss that bone over there, man. He can say what he wants to say, and then I'll just. Mine's non-combative. It's not necessarily.
No. I'm going to toss it over to Brian, and then come back to Jeremiah, and then we're going in closing thoughts.
I just wanted to point out something that Danielle said about using the term atheist as a primary identifier. I was at a interfaith meeting yesterday, actually, with a group that's being started by an atheist and wants to include non-believer voices, just voices in a community in typical interfaith work. And when asked to introduce myself, I introduced myself first as an atheist, and the reason why I do that is along what Daniel was saying, but I don't see it as a firebrand thing, as I just see it as a necessary thing to make sure that we're doing the group identifier. And then I added on, I'm an atheist, and I'm a secular humanist, and then that way I'm getting the common term out of the way, which just declares I don't believe in God, and then also adding on to it, and this is how I derive my ethical system. And this is, and that way, when I'm in a public space where, and I don't see it as a firebrand thing, but kind of a diplomatic thing, but also an educational thing. It opens up the opportunity for me to then, people can ask the questions, what is a secular humanist? What is an atheist? Why are those two terms separate? What's the difference between the two? And it's not just about being a firebrand, and for some people it may be, because atheists might set them off. But I think it's also about the normalization and the education of the general public.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And, I mean, and believers get the same type of group identification benefit, too. I mean, you can say, I'm a Christian, even if you're a Southern Baptist, even if you're a Mormon, even if, I mean, it's the same thing. But if you call yourself a Christian, you get all of this lobbying power that you don't get if you call yourself a Missouri Synod Lutheran or something. And I think that we're losing a lot of activism power by not taking advantage of that. And like Brian was saying, you don't have to be a firebrand to be an atheist. There are plenty of atheists who are not firebrands, but there's still an advantage to calling yourself an atheist in that it desensitizes people to that word. It helps destigmatize that word in the lexicon, which is really what we want.
Now I'm really interested to hear what Jeremiah says.
As I said, man, as I said, it's non-combative, and I enjoyed every single
Wait, hold on. I don't know if what Jeremiah is going to say is combative, so I've got to be cautious.
Right. No. It's good. I was just gonna say this. I was gonna say that the reason I asked the question is because my education took place in a small liberal arts college, and it was focused on mass communication theory, interpersonal communication theory, and in that I found it to be of great value to at least strive as an activist to be all things to all people, to try to be able to be an extraordinary situationalist, to analyze in the moment. You have to be quick on your feet because you're an activist. You're dealing with people face to face. You're dealing with groups, people in numbers, and to be able to read your crowd, to be able to read what within me must I draw out of me in order to try to connect with these people in a way that is connected to my ambition or my aim, like you were saying. That's the first thing. The second one is this: I think it's almost a proverbial truth at this point, and I think it's one that activists would do well to remember, and that is that having a well-balanced life is not a bad thing, right? And that's where I was coming from. We're from kind of two places, one being the theory and being all things to all people, trying to be an extraordinary situationalist, and on the other hand, being a well-balanced person that's not simply a gallivanting hobby horse. Right. I mean, I think that's a bizarre, and I think it's unfortunate. I think that's an unfortunate expression of enthusiasm that could be directed and harnessed in a way and broken in a way that it could be of great value. But that's all I wanted to say, and it was a pleasure. Once again, it was awesome hearing all you guys, and I'm excited to see a number of these faces, and I hope it's not the last time that we see each other.
I like to respond to this also. To me, I don't believe that we have to be all things to all people. I think that we should be true to ourselves. And I think that authenticity, is often a great motivator. And I think that the most important thing really is to know yourself, love yourself, and be yourself. Be who you are. Live. To me, I live activism. I don't decide, I think I'm going to do this nice thing. And although I do believe that people should call themselves atheists, I don't tell other people what they should call themselves. I don't tell other people what they should believe. I tell them why it's reasonable to me and why I think that it would promote the best reason for them. But I allow other people to have the right to decide what, who, and how they are. So, I mean, I think it's important to speak out, and I absolutely support, calling yourself an atheist. But I don't decide for other people what's right for them.
Well, thank you for that, Damien, and that was a great point to enter in on closing statements and the closing question of the night. Now, we do have one more question from my graphics guy, Earl Evans, again. Thank you, Earl, for asking another question. The question that we're actually going to be going with for our closing question to sort of tack on to closing thoughts on tonight is, should atheists challenge nativity scenes during the Christmas holidays? Let's actually start with David Smarley. Do you think we should challenge nativity scenes? on this holiday season?
Of course, absolutely. If the nativity scenes are on public ground and supported by some sort of government entity, absolutely. I wouldn't go up and challenge someone that has one in their front yard. I think that's their right to do that. But yeah, if some city hall is putting it out there, absolutely. And since I didn't get in on that at the end, I want to have one thing to say about the whole firebrand diplomat thing. Anyone who has seen my talk called Sandwich Sensibility from Aposticon knows how I see Danielle has seen it. Knows how I feel about labels, and I get called a diplomat all the time, but I think that's misunderstanding my purpose, because being a diplomat does not mean you don't call bullshit on bullshit, and you don't get passionate, and you don't tell people when they're wrong, and you don't tell people that their belief is poisonous. I do. It's just that when I sit here and have a conversation with a Christian for 3.5 hours, and we leave here shaking hands and smiling, that leaves the door open for them to come back. And so people call that being, diplomatic, when I think I'm both a lot of the times. And so
that's a little background information on my answer on the question, because David brought up a great speech that he actually made at Aposticon in the past. That was actually something that I've watched and that sort of helped me clarify my position on the subject itself, that you can't get trapped into a label. Right. The second you get trapped into a label, that's when you basically admit that you are letting others decide your fate in the surroundings in which you are in. And that's when you lose in the long run.
So when people ask me, hey, are you more firebrand or are you more diplomatic? I'm going to say, damn it, I'm effective. That's what I know. I'm effective. However I'm feeling at that time, whatever that situation calls for, and whatever's going to work most for the person I'm talking to. If it's a group of atheists and they need a little firebrand for uplifting, I'll do that. If there's a Christian sitting across from me that's super laid back and very sweet, I'm not going to go on the attack. I'm going to match what they sort of the level and kind of meet them where they are, so that I can continue to be effective. So. But back on your question.
Amen.
Absolutely, I would challenge nativity scenes as if some government entity of sorts is actually sponsored.
Well, when I'm actually asked that question, I just say, "Damn it, I'm Michael Phelps," and that's enough. I got the same name as an Olympic swimmer that has like 23 gold medals and that smoked a bomb. That's how I deal with most situations.
Well, I just want to jump in on this. I mean, I want everybody to understand that it's not just that it's okay if it's on someone's front lawn as opposed to, a government building. People have a constitutional right to practice their religion however they want, as long as it's not sponsored by the government or implied endorsement or sponsorship by the government. I support people doing this on their front lawn. I think that it's silly. I think that it's a nice ritual, as far as just humans do rituals as part of what makes us the type of animal that we are. Not every animal does that. I think it's kind of cool, but I do have an objection to teaching children things that are false. I think indoctrination is a dangerous thing, and that's another can of worms. But I completely support and will fight for the right for individuals to do this stuff on private property. That is something I very much support. What I don't support is doing this on government property, and that's really the issue. It's not nativity displays. It doesn't matter what kind of display it is. It could be a Ten Commandments Mayat or a nativity display. If it's religious, it cannot be on public property unless it's open to everyone. And I would prefer that it not be there at all. That would really be ideal, because there really shouldn't be any kind of religious display on government property. That's not what we're about in a secular government. But if you're going to have one, you have to let everybody else have one too, which means that if the Satanists want to put up a display, they're allowed to do that. It means if the atheists or the Pastafarians or whatever want to put up a display, they're allowed to do that. And if you don't like that, don't put your freaking nativity display on government property. It's really not that complicated. You can put it on your church front lawn. You can put it on your own front lawn. It's not about what the display is. It's about government sponsorship of the display. That's really the point. And if you see something like that, please get in touch with us. American Atheists would very much like to know about it so that we can speak out against it and get it removed.
Thank you for that beautiful answer, Danielle. It brought tears to my eyes. But yes, let's pass this question on to the next man in the line. Damien, what's your thoughts? Shall we take nativity scenes if they are out during the holiday season?
Yeah, my thoughts is threefold. One is that I think that it's against the law, and so I don't support that. Two is I think that if it's going to be part of the law, then like was already said, that I think that it should be open to everybody. I mean, I personally think it's nonsense, you know, but I think it's really about the public private property issue. If I'm private property, I mean, I don't care. People can put it up with it they like. And but I think that in general, though, I would like to have a completely secular society that removes all religion or non-religion elements from government and you know, places that are you know, government land or public land. I mean, that's of all kinds, not just nativity scenes, but anything.
That would include that answer. That is a great answer to the question, and we are kind of pressed for time. I do apologize for cutting you short, but let's pass it on down the line to Brian Fields. Brian Fields, do you think we should take on nativity scenes? Do you think Jesus belongs out on public grounds?
Well, we have taken them on, so I would have to say the answer to that is yes. But I think to add to the conversation, I want to say that I think it's an extraordinary extension of Christian privilege that from November through December that we have a holiday that is one day out of those 2 months, 3 months, sometimes into January even, that any criticism of that holiday or of the government endorsement of that holiday is somehow an attack when we say we want to put up a competing message in the public space. And it just floors me every time we take on something like this. We took up on one in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, and we were told that if they allow us to put our message up, that more odious groups like the KKK would then be able to come in. So they were going to shut down the public square and not allow anybody to put any message up. Which, you know, we got what we wanted. We wanted it out of the public square. It got moved to a local church, and of course that was perfectly fine. But yeah, that was a glaring example of the type of hubris that you see. And then, of course, we got blamed for taking the nativity out of the square. It was when we simply wanted to put up our own message, and that was actually the tack we took when we approached the town council.
Well, I commend you for your actions, Brian. It took guts. It took the iron will of Brian Fields.
Well, that one was I can't take full credit for that one. That one was the organization that I represent, but my predecessors took that on, and while I did promote it, I just want to make that clear.
But by doing that, it was the core of activism itself, and true activists were the ones that carried out that act. Mm-hmm. But let's actually move this situation along so we can get this show over and done with. So, Jeremiah, you are the person that's been in the paper for doing this exact question.
Yeah.
So,
twice. Recently. Yeah, twice recently. It was and you know what? You know you're doing something amazing, dude, when you protest something last year and it's in the paper again this year, just for nostalgia's sake. But anyway, no, They tucked it and they dovetailed the controversy at the end of an article about my speech at a local SSA chapter that just started up. And then they did a follow-up to a nativity scene that I protested last year in a small town called Dorr, Michigan. And I won't go into any of the details because you can find them elsewhere online. But I'll say this, that my mantra was clear. Public property on public property. Private property on private property. If a private citizen wants privately owned property on public land, then public officials need a public policy that sets the terms of the ownership, placement, operation, maintenance, and cleanup of said private property. End of story for me. If they have that and it's publicly accessible, there you go. If they have a nativity scene, though, and they don't have other ornamentation that's publicly owned and placed and operated, maintained, and cleaned up. If they don't have that to water down the message, that's a different problem. But insofar as the actual placement of a nativity on public property, I say you have to have a public policy. It has to be open to every single person, and it has to regard the ownership, placement, operation, maintenance, and cleanup of that property. Pure and simple.
Beautiful answer, Mr. Bannister. Beautiful answer.
Mm.
Let's actually pass this on to Randy and Albany. Do you guys want to take a shot at this?
Albany, you want to go first?
Yeah, I will. I don't have too much to say on it, but it's something I haven't actually thought about at all after becoming an atheist. I've noticed that while I've only been an atheist for a small amount of time, I still kind of hold some of the beliefs, not strongly in any way, I don't really hold them at all, that I held when I believed. They just kind of linger. I don't know if it's because, it's that comfort zone. But I always had that idea of, people can do whatever they want, and that makes much more sense when it comes to if it's personal. It's personal. People should be allowed to do that no matter if we agree or disagree. But it's just such an interesting thing now that I've come out in many ways, what all of you have said about what you believe. It's personal, but if it's government property, then that's not okay, or you allow everyone to do it. And it's really opened my eyes to seeing really how, in a sense, hypocritical many religious people are, specifically Christians around this time of year, with nativity scenes are great, but any other religion is terrible, horrible, and they can't showcase it. So really this is just opening up my eyes more and more to what I believe and where I can go from there.
I'm glad it's an educational experience for you, Albany, and I commend you for being able to expand your horizons on such subject matters as they exist in your psychological
Hey, Mike.
dynamic.
Can I ask a question real quick? I have a question for Jeremiah.
Go ahead.
I'm just curious. You talked about the public policy. We have some small towns here in Texas that will write policies intentionally slanted toward basically only allowing Christian prayers at city council meetings.
Right.
They will word it in such a way that's sort of a loophole.
Sure.
So what is your take on a situation where if it's a very small town, they say, yeah, sure, everybody's open, anything you want, and the only thing that's sitting there is the nativity scene, and there's 1,800 people in the town, and the 10 atheists that live there don't want to tell anybody because they don't want to have their houses egged and toilet papered, because that's what happens in small towns, let's face it. And so what is your take on that? If they offer it and say, hey, it's available to everyone in the policy, it just so happens that that's the only one. Are you fine with that being in a public area sponsored by a government entity?
Sponsored by a government entity. If it's a privately owned display, and they go through a process that's open and equal to everybody, then no, I wouldn't have a problem. If it's publicly owned and operated and maintained, and they don't have publicly owned, operated, and maintained ornamentation that waters down the message, then it violates the Constitution. If people, I'm glad you brought this up, and I like you. I'm actually really glad to see you. You're probably, no offense to anybody else, but of all the people I saw the names of, I said, I'm glad I'm seeing this guy.
I was thinking we were friends, but okay, thanks.
It's true. So, but anyway, no offense to everybody else, because you guys are great. But I would say this. I would say this is where activists do come into play for those 10 people in that town. Right? In the town I was in, there was only me and one other person that I knew of. And in fact, that's the SSA I spoke at this year started in large part out of motivation because they saw on the news, oh my gosh, there's more atheists here. We're not alone. Like we can do this. But where there's entities like, let's say, American Atheist or Freedom from Religion Foundation or different ones that can, on the behalf of an anonymous citizen locally, send a letter that says, listen, you cannot do certain things. This would be a violation. If they say, well, we're going to keep on doing it, then either the organizations would have to move forward in that way if they thought it was important enough, or the individual locally would have to. And the individual locally would have to either way, And it sucks when you have individuals who, because of the culture they live in, especially small town Texas, right? And I lived in Texas for a while, but small town Texas, where that happens. It's a reality of the situation. And I think that's where people like us come into play. I think it's where organizations come into play, and we take small steps. I think it's incremental, and I don't really know beyond that what the answer is to fix something like that Christmas.
Well,
Right?
why
I don't
is
know.
why isn't your stance just stay out of the nativity scene business altogether? Don't allow any religious material. If you are, the city government, don't allow private citizens to bring
Right.
stuff up. Tell the private citizens, put it on your own lawn. Don't put it at City Hall. Why isn't that your stance? I'm just curious.
Well, it's not. It wouldn't be my stance because the context of what you were describing is a town where the vast majority are Christian people, and I don't like. I don't like beating the head against a wall, especially with activism. I'm 36. I don't want to waste my time. But I would look at it and say, there's many things that individuals can do, and I'm the last guy that's inactive on this. Right? Like I very strongly believe in taking on things that are in violations of the Constitution. But do I think that we should advance the idea that there's no displays whatsoever? There's great arguments in its defense, and I'm not convinced either way. I'm simply playing realism here and saying, this is the culture, this is the context we're in, this is the constitutional law, this is if they violate the law, this is what's going on, here's the cultural context and the struggle that the 10 atheists have, and here's where activists like us can come in to help.
To add to additionally to what you both are saying,
Right.
the organizations that are at our disposal as secular-minded individuals are there. You've got Freedom from Religion Foundation, and you've got American Atheists. They're looking for fights
Right.
that are unconstitutional to take on that will be a win for atheism. Bring these situations to them and sort of go from there.
I just want to point out, I don't know if everybody really understands quite how this works unless you really, really looked into it, but American Atheists does not choose our lawsuits based on how egregious the violations of the Constitution are. We choose our lawsuits exclusively on whether or not we believe we can win.
Right.
The reason that's so important is because we absolutely do not want to set precedent against us. Losing a lawsuit does not simply mean that the display gets to stay. It means that the next time there's a display, they could point to the last time there was a judgment about this and say, well, precedent is built up now that shows that this is okay, and it hurts it every time going forward. So even if there is a display like this on government property, if we don't have, it is possible to stay confidential as a complainant in this type of situation, but if we want to fight something like this, if we are going to write a letter, we don't write letters unless we're prepared to follow up with a lawsuit all the way to the Supreme Court, and we're not going to sue unless we have a plaintiff who's very strongly against it and who's going to work with us. It's just not winnable otherwise. And I think a lot of people don't really understand this. They say things along the lines of like, well, why don't you go after things like the more egregious cases? In Michigan, they passed these laws about. I'm not even going to get into it. The point is, there are some examples of things in this country, abortion laws that are obviously religiously motivated. All sorts of things about marriage equality, things that are obviously religiously motivated. The reason we don't focus on those is because they're not winnable as easily as Ten Commandments monuments. Ten Commandments monuments are very easy to win, and the point is setting precedent. So when we're talking about writing a letter and stuff like that, that's what we're looking for. Can we win the case? And when we're talking about this kind of thing, there is precedent, unfortunately, that says that if there's one display from one religion, it's constitutional as long as there are displays available from other religions. I don't think that's an ideal solution at all, for the reasons that David was talking about. The best solution is separation of religion and government. I think it's really obvious here. If somebody wants to have a religious display that is absolutely within their constitutional right, and I support them in that, I think it's silly, but they are allowed to do it as long as they do it on church property or on private property. If you want to do it on government property, it causes headaches for everybody. It will start a fight, and they shouldn't be doing it in the first place. However, legally, unfortunately, because of the way precedent is set up right now, they can kind of do it as long as there's a loophole set in place that we can do it too, which is not what I want. I don't want any religious displays on government property. That's making the problem worse, not better. But
the only
go ahead.
The only chance we have to answer David on this as well. The only chance that we have to actually reach the ideal, where you're going to have no prayers in front of government bodies,
Mm-hmm.
no nativity scenes in public displays, is to show that the paradigm that the church that the courts have already established, where they say, well, as long as it's equal, everybody's okay, is to show that that doesn't work.
Right.
So we have to challenge it according to the rules that have been set up by court precedent and say, okay, the courts have said that if it's equal, that it's okay. So now we have to show that equal is not okay.
Not okay with them. Right.
In order to be able to get the courts to say, okay, well, maybe this doesn't work after all. So there's a staging process. You have to take it in steps and say, well, okay, they said it's equal. We can show here that it's not. Let's push it all the way to the Supreme Court and get them to say, well, if the other side isn't going to play by the rules, then maybe we need to change the rules.
Great point, Brian, and I love when you make a point like that. I've got to remember that David is always a surprise. I did not expect that question to come out, and that was just an epic question to sort of help close down the mood of the episode itself. So since we've actually gone from there, so thank you for that, David.
It's always.
And to sort of back up what Jeremiah was saying, of all our guests tonight, you are somebody that was more last minute, and I've got to say it was a pleasure having you on, as well as everybody else, because you are all amazing guests. But I was glad to make the acquaintance, at least for the first time in a while, with David Smiley yet again. It's nice to rekindle an old contact. But there is someone I still got to pose this question to, because he's been the quiet foxhole atheist that's been basically dodging this question all night. So, Randy Bevan, do you think we should take on nativity scenes if they are done in the holiday season? Do you think Jesus belongs in the holiday season and out in the cold, out in the winter? Do you think a nativity scene should exist?
Should exist? Sure. I think that I can just summarize with some of the opinions that have already been given here. Danielle pointed out that it's all about precedence, and if we can't really win the lawsuit, then it's a bad idea to bring up a lawsuit. And so I think you made a really good point right there. I would agree with David Smalley in saying that this should be on government property. There should be no endorsement by the government for these scenes. But if you can't win the lawsuit, she's right. It's not worth going after.
Well, thank you for that, Randy. It was short, sweet, and to the point, and now we can go into closing plugs. Does anybody have a plug they want to shoot out there before we close off the show?
Well, I do.
Danielle, what plug do you want to include in the ending of The Age of Reason tonight?
Joel, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. Appreciate being here. Lovely to catch up with all of you and to meet those of you that I haven't chatted with before. I do want to say that the American Atheist National Convention is going to be in Memphis, Tennessee, April 2nd through 5th. It's going to be huge. If you didn't catch the announcement, we just released the names of 30 additional speakers, workshop hosts, and panelists that are going to be coming. And we just secured the cast of Mystery Science Theater 3000, who are not only going to be giving a talk, but they're also going to be riffing on a movie live, doing their show live at the American Atheist Conference. We haven't announced what movie that is yet because we're still working on getting the licensing worked out, but it's going to be a prominent Christian movie that you have heard of. I'll just leave it there. But the point
God's not dead. God's not dead.
Well, we'll see.
The best part of that movie is Kevin Sorbo dying.
You're going to be excited.
I love a movie where they kill off Kevin Sorbo.
I want to say, though, that we have a sale right now. Tickets to the convention make great gifts if you're the gift-giving type this time of year. For the next... is it even a week? I'm not sure which day we're cutting this off, but it's really soon, like within a week or so. We are selling the tickets for $50 off if you register right now. You just go to atheists.org/convention to register. Jan Hirsi Ali is the keynote. All the speakers are listed there. It's going to be awesome. And if you're a member, you get an additional $30 off on top of the $50. So make sure you do that this week if you want to come. I mean, you can register up up until the day at the door, you can register too. But if you want to save $50 or $80 if you're a member, register right now, atheist.org/convention. It's going to be awesome. Please come. I would love to see you there.
Thank you, Danielle, for that beautiful plug, and I will be looking forward to taking advantage of that bargain and sale. Anybody else got a plug they want to throw out there? Brian,
I would like to say,
Brian, you have a plug?
Yeah, I have two things. First, we've just announced our Pennsylvania State Atheist-Humanist Conference. The tickets have gone on sale. The website is atheistpa.org. We've got a lot of great speakers going out the gate. It's not as big as AACon, but if you're local in the general Pennsylvania and surrounding states area or even anywhere nearby and want to see these speakers, check out atheistpa.org. Click on the tickets link and the speakers link and check it out. It's going to be a great show. But at the conference, we're going to be doing food packing for local food banks as an activist project. And if you want to help finance that project, 25 cents. Each meal costs 25 cents, and that's it. That you can feed one person one meal for 25 cents if you go to gofundme.com/atheistfighthunger, all one word. And if you can help us out with that, we can use our conference to do some great good, and we're very proud of that project. So please help us out with that.
Thank you for those plugs. Brian, Damien? Damien?
yes, I wanted to throw a plug out for my book that's going to be coming out in a couple months. It's called The Tree of Lies and Its Hidden Roots, Exposing the Evolution of Religion and Removing the Rationale of Faith. And one thing that it's going to do that's going to be a little bit different than some other atheist books that have been out before is I go back 100,000 years and use archaeology and basically outline religion from that point. And that's the first 2 chapters of my book, and I have over 1,050 references, and so it's definitely a very scholarly book. And then I also use a lot of philosophy. So,
David?
Awesome. Looking forward.
David?
Oh, yeah.
Plugs?
Oh, plugs. Yeah, dogmadebate.com and atheistaudiobooks.com. That's where I live.
He lives on audiobooks.
I live at atheistaudiobooks.com on dogmadebate.com street. That's kind of my...
So you sort of live on kitty corner on that little intersection.
Absolutely.
Well, that's good to know. At least we know where to find you.
And hey, Brian, I'm actually sharing that link right now and donating. I really love that cause, man. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, David. I really appreciate that.
Everybody go do it.
I will actually be including a link to that. Brian will give me a link to that after we're done with this show, and the link will be found to that cause right down below in the video description of this episode. So make sure to check it out and go to the GoFundMe.com/atheistfighthunger.
Yeah, it's plural. Atheists fight hunger.
Atheists Fight Hunger. Yeah, I saw it on like a broken line, and it just sort of broke my concentration of what I was reading. So yes, go to GoFundMe.com/atheistfighthunger and donate because it's a worthy cause, and it is led by an amazing individual, which I have had the pleasure to come to know. So we do have one more plug to do tonight. Paleo Radio.
Yes. Yeah, Paleo Radio. It's we just did another show today. The other host is Joe Elder. He's the man. You can find out more about Paleo Radio by going to paleoradio.us. That's PALEORADIO.us. You can also find us on YouTube and Twitter at the same thing, and it's Paleocrat. PALEOCRAT. So I've got a show. I'll say 2 more things. I'm being interviewed tomorrow on John Mosman Live about my conversion, life and work as a Christian activist and pastor, my deconversion and my plans for the future. And then on Thursday I do Bandman Country, and that's a back and forth dialogue between a conservative Christian guy and myself. We talk about politics and religion. It's just a bunch of fun.
Well, with that actually being said, the most important thing you've heard in that is make sure to check out John Mosman tomorrow because he has a great guest on, and it's going to be an amazing experience. So make sure to check out their YouTube channel to where you will be able to watch that live. What time will that be at, Jeremiah?
9:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And let me say thank you. Just it's a good courtesy. I want to say thank you, man, for inviting me on, even if only at the last minute. It was a whole bunch of fun.
It's always a pleasure to have you on, my friend.
Thank you.
Again, that is 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to go check that out. Also, last note, go check out GoFundMe.com/AtheistFightHunger and donate some money to a worthy cause to feed the hungry, because it's beating a stereotype and it's showing that there is a kind and cuddly side to the secular-minded and atheist in general. So, with that being said,
Wait, Mike.
finally...
No. Not yet.
Oh, God. Oh, God. Foxhole, what do you got?
I got one more thing to say. I want to thank all of our guests for being here. This was a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I want to thank you all for coming here and being on one of the pilot episodes for for Secular TV, which is a network we've just recently stood up to promote free
the network
speech.
to Reason TV? Are we Reason TV?
Correcting myself. Stop interrupting me.
I'm sorry. I was excited that you were naming it after the show. It would make sense.
Anyway, thank you for joining and being a part of this. Well, we have a lot of good stuff lined up in the future with a whole bunch of new shows that are going to be rolling out over the next couple of weeks. We want to be one of the places where free speech is protected as far as is possible within the terms of service. So, again, thank you all for being here.
Thanks for having us.
The most important thing about that is that we are not looking to limit content. If you have something that is an interesting perspective and you want a safe place to do it, that's what Secular TV is here for. That's the thing that makes us different from every other network that's out there, right? Whether it's Atheism TV or any other network that's in the secular community, the atheist community. We are the ones that want to have everyone and every point of view in the secular perspective to be addressed and on our channel and network. So, check us out, give us a message, find me on Facebook. I am Michael Phelps. You type in the Neo-Atheist, you find me. I mean, I'm not that hard to find. You can find me on Google. But yes, with that being said, pilot episode of a podcast on Secular TV is now officially done. Albany, do you have anything to add? Is that a no? Is that a yes?
Nope, I keep forgetting. I just want to thank you all as well, and I very much look forward to hopefully having you all on the show throughout the future.
Thank you to my guests. Thank you, David Smiley. You are amazing. Danielle Moscato, nothing but love.
Yep.
Brian Fields, my neighbor to the south, nothing but respect. Enjoy the winter, for it is here. Winter is coming, as they would say in my favorite TV show. So, one more time, GoFundMe.com/AtheistFightHunger. Worthy cause, go donate. And remember, the age of reason is upon us. So prepare!